2, the second era, the early elementary years. Chapter 8, the Sacramental Age. Cyberporn. Part 2. And so it came to pass that Amira had started kindergarten in the same school district as Milo, who was in first grade at the time. Milo had entered the Cyberporn school district as a kindergartner just the previous year. However, both children were in two different schools, as they lived on two different sides of town. Milo began at Hazelnut Forest, as that year they had enough room for him. Amira attended Dingleberry Elementary, as that was the school for her region. The first part of first grade had not been so easy for Milo, as he had a terrible teacher whose name was Edwina Magruder. She was a narcissistic slave driver, concerned only with the paycheck and status of being so qualified to teach in multiple states. In her many years, many first-hand accounts from parent-teachers night stated that this teacher had only spoke about her qualifications and time teaching without giving an ounce of information of what the children would be learning as the other teachers had done. This teacher was a year away from retirement and really did not care about her students. One teacher, Mrs. Watson, knew that this Magruder was terrible and let Ray and Margaret know how awful she was. Mrs. Watson even let Milo talk about how horrible the teacher was treating him. On the first day of school, this Magruder woman reprimanded Milo just for asking to get a drink. Milo had a hard time with teachers since he started school, as many of the teachers he had lacked the patience and experience to work with pre-grade children, which, as we know, can be quite a handful. Margaret and Myriad return. By this time, Margaret returns and calls for a meeting with Melendel and Elfie. Over this time, Melendel was still looking for a new Synexit with no such luck. Margaret comes with good news, explaining that she found a way to break the spell, binding the school-age charges and their peers. She then explains that the breaking of the spell will not be able to begin until the new year, as many things still need to be arranged. Margaret gives Melendel a business card for a gin known as Ivana, should they have trouble in years to come. Margaret also brought Myriad from the 8th Enagrammatron Order to assist Melendel in searching for a new Synexit. Myriad brought some stability in first assisting the charge with trying to devised a plan to see this teacher as a grandmotherly figure. Marian knew well that this teacher reminded Milo of Marilyn's mother, but was nothing like her mother. Little did Marian know how bad her plan would work out. Sunday school. A few weekends after school started, Milo had been enrolled in Sunday school. For all of Milo's life, he had been raised Catholic, which should not surprise us in being in an Italian-American family. Church had been a very mysterious and fascinating endeavor for Milo since he was a small child. It is quite true that Milo had some exposure with all the relatives being Catholic, praying before dinner, and church statues at Grandma Rosa and Grandpa Tony's house. Milo was also quite familiar with these figures referred to as God, Jesus, Mary, and saints, and knew of this book called the Bible. Milo also knew that the holidays like Christmas and Easter had something to do with church. Back when Milo was at preschool at St. Timothy's, a teacher brought a nail to school and explained that it went through Jesus' hands. Some parents complained, as they felt it scared the kids. Milo had memories, such as going to Ash Wednesday one morning with Marilyn at the age of 3. Milo also remembered these purple flags with white silhouettes of a cross, nail, and hammer. What went on during Mass was unlike anything Milo had seen in his normal, everyday life. The time had come for Milo to learn all these mysteries of church and what it all meant. Sunday school proved to be a more pleasant experience than ordinary school, and was in a place of familiarity. As we recall, Milo went to this school for his first year of preschool, plus Milo had a nice teacher in Sunday school. This teacher had actually been Grandma and Grandpa Biancatello's neighbor. In this place, Milo actually felt a part of something bigger and more meaningful than the world of school that just emphasized conformity through threats of punishment. The great news Milo received was that he would be making his first communion the next year. This is that strange ritual near the end of Mass where adults go up to get a snack. So this is in the mind of a child. The only thing Milo understood of communion was when he went to Emma's first communion party a few years ago, and when Margaret told him that Holy Thursday was the origin of communion. Of course, any Catholic with some proper catechesis believes that Jesus is truly the bread and the wine. But what does that mean to a first grader lacking the profound vocabulary to grasp at this high theology? For Milo, this simply meant an initiation into something great and the path back to paradise. Milo had been living in a fragmented world that seemed so utterly dangerous and judgmental for so many years that religion seemed quite promising. Even to young Milo, the Mass had always given him a sense of unity not experienced in the worldly systems. Plus Sunday school taught that it all came down to love. In this place, there was no judgment or fear, no constant threats of danger. In fact, in Sunday school, Milo remembered learning about morality through watching Winnie the Pooh and being able to empathize with Tigger. Whatever this was not, one thing was certain. This space had been sacred. This place had been reminded Milo of the mystical beginning lost once he reached the second semester of preschool. By the time the Christmas season came about, school became slightly more fun than it had been for the past few years. Actually, more like the past few months. Even Magruder had been in a slightly better mood during that December, considering she was near getting a week vacation. One Saturday, Ray and Margaret took Milo and Lydia to breakfast with Santa Claus. Another week later, Ray and Milo went to a walk through Bethlehem at a Protestant church located in the county outside of Essex. Then that evening, Milo and Lydia went over to Grandma Pearl's as the Rumcorns had arrived the day before, and Ray and Margaret had a work party to go to. Milo was happy to have the Rumcorns back in town, and despite envying Kevin and Kyle for being able to get out of school early, was looking forward to getting some time away from school. Over this time, the Biancatellos and the Rumcorn and Grandma Pearl took their annual visit to see Grandma Gladys. On Christmas Eve, Milo went to church with his family and the Rumcorns at St. Timothy's. This mass put Milo into a trance as the music played on the pipe organ and sung by the children's choir. From what can be remembered, the opening hymn was "O Come All Ye Faithful," as is the standard procession in all of Western Christendom. The other songs were "Silent Night," "Angels We Have Heard on High," "The First Noel," and "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." During church, the family had to sit on the other side, across from the choir. As like most holidays, many of the Christmas and Easter onlyers went to Mass that night. As for the Yuletide season, this had gone quite well, and was a time of festivities. For 2 days, Milo and Lydia were at Grandma Pearl's, along with the Rumcorn and visits from Grandpa Paul. Both Uncle Mike and Uncle Giorgio held some parties, including a pizza and pop night and a New Year's Eve brunch. Returning to school had not been that much fun. The night before going back to school, Milo had a dream he was boarding a plane to visit the running home in Missouri. Then he had woken up and came back to school with Magruder in a foul mood. The governor hypercordo. In Bubels, the kobolds had been a bit stumped, as they had no clue what they were to do next. Around this time, there had been a great invasion of the governor hypercordo from the facility. None of the kobolds had ever seen the governor, as he dwelled in his own mansion full of henchmen known as the Offsprings. The Offsprings are the joining of split psyches of the hypercordos. They become a monstrous creature with two ugly sights, and resemble monsters that mere earthlings remember in myths, fairy tales, nightmares, and fantasies. As to exactly who the offspring were in Capsuda, no one knew. However, there were rumors that there were offspring dwelling in the mountains, which most Londinians feared to tread. This governor and his henchmen had taken over the Bubels, as he could not stand to see the kobolds use land under his jurisdiction for anything except against his ambitions for wealth and power. In fact, the institutions had only been a place to keep the kobolds busy, so they did not have time to notice the ploys and eventually break their wills to be compliant slaves. When the kobolds escaped the facility, many Maludicos lost their only means of living, which is not about money, but about their authority over the kobolds was the only thing that kept them active, as without them, the Maludicos would become quite weak and dormant. This governor had faked being a djinn of the first Anogrammatron order to teach the kobolds some life lessons. This governor started off playing the roles of a caring but tough authority. However, his true colors showed when the kobolds were subjected to tough labor, which consisted of digging the land for natural resources and destroying the plant life of Bubels. This land was slowly turning into a lifeless and destroyed land. The governor had not found any natural resources and became paranoid that the kobolds had found them, but were hoarding them in caves. The kobolds hated being under the governor and knew that something had been wrong with him, but feared questioning his moral authority, as the righteousness of the first Anogrammatron order was not simply something that should be questioned. Typically, the retired Selected Oliver appeared to the kobolds as those Selected advancing to elderhood have a sixth sense in which they can detect if someone is in trouble. Oliver knew well that the Forrester clan were in trouble and needed some guidance. The kobolds felt that they could be honest with Oliver, as he emitted a sense of peace that nothing needed to be held back. Oliver then explained that they can get in touch with the great mystery of Sat, or also known in this realm as the Great Dance. They had heard wondrous legends about this dance, who took the form of Osiris to the Kemetic order of the angelic realm, ministers, and Krishna to the Vedic of the angelic ministers. There had been a legend amongst the jinns and mistivants of a great king who would one day come in the name of the dance to establish justice and peace. Before leaving, Oliver handed the kobolds a set of plans to build a house on this soil that could eventually reach up to the gardens. Eventually, the governor was exposed as being a manipulative hypochordo with no credibility and only interested in might and wealth. They found this out when it became abundantly clear that the governor was going to destroy the kobolds until they could force a confession out of them. After the governor was exposed, he immediately fled and had been in hiding since. Rumors had circulated that he was being held prisoner in the legendary city of Agrabah, but no proof of this really existed. As to where he was, no one knew. The new Senexit. After some months of agony and waiting, a new Senexit was voted in. The new Senexit was Theodore, who would be well equipped to handle these times. After Theodore took office, the great reign of peace began, as had not been seen since the holiday of 1992. 3 years the earth had waited for this time of peace, where life would continue right where things left off so long ago. On earth, this set the course for sanctification of what had been made desecrated. This would naturally be a very difficult process that could take a great amount of time and sacrifice to have this dream come about. Myriad's time as Melendel and Alfie's assistant had come to an end, much to her happiness. Myriad told Melendel that she was not equipped to handle this situation with Magruder. Myriad explains that Magruder is a nasty old witch who cannot be worked with, no matter how grandmotherly she looks, and that boy needs to learn some dissent. Myriad then makes a referral for her colleague Bilius if one like Magruder ever comes around. Myriad knew well that Melendel's charges attract a lot of negative attention from tyrants like Magruder, and knows well that these are not people that can be negotiated with. Around this time, Mogris arrived with some great news of having found a solution to break the spell the pupils had been under. According to Mogris, the spell tethering the pupils to the Hypochordo's headquarters was beginning to break. Melendel asks Mogris what she did, and she gives a smirk, explaining that they will find out soon enough. Melinda gives a skeptical look. Alfie starts anticipating all the possibilities of breaking the spell, while Theodore shares some concerns about such reckless behavior. Over the course of this journey, school became more enjoyable for Milo, though he preferred not to be in school. He had for every bad teacher at least one good teacher, but this year changed with Magruder. One day, Milo had enough of her and defied her nastiness. When Magruder began to mistreat the poor students, Milo put on quite a show and pretended to be a hibachi chef, distracting the class from her nasty reprimand. A few weeks earlier, the Biancatellos, Grandpa Tony, and Grandma Rosa, went to a hibachi-style restaurant for Ray's birthday. Milo apparently liked the show a little too much. Milo was placed in timeout for this act of rebellion and distraction, and he fell asleep in the timeout chair, much to Magruder's wrath. That night, Mrs. Magruder called Milo's parents, complaining about how he shows such a strong dislike for her, even though she said she just loves Milo. Yeah, right. Before Easter, Uncle Giorgio and Aunt Judy bought Milo the movies, Lydia the movie Pocahontas, and Milo the movie The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. During this time, Milo became quite obsessed with both movies and really did not like Governor Radcliffe, as he reminded him too much of that witch Magruder. Milo started to see Pocahontas as a role model, as she was a rebel who rejected the stoic warrior her father betrothed her to. Milo, from the Winnie the Pooh, Milo remembered the song Heffalumps and Woozles from the Be Our Guest sing-along, which was from the short Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh was a three-part movie with three stories, being Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, and Winnie the Pooh and Tigger. Easter had also been another trance for Milo. When such hymns were sung at Mass, such as Psalm 18, Alleluia, Give Thanks, and of course the standard Catholic processional, Jesus Christ is risen today. Since that day, Milo had a love for sacred music, as it did something for him that mere preaching could never do. Before Mass, the priest, Father Sobieski, invited all the children to sit on the altar for the remainder of the service. At communion, Milo got confused and left the altar to return to his parents. Over that day at dinner, Milo had been in a bit of a foul mood at his grandparents when Ray told the family that he tried to get communion and all the relatives told him he was too young. What really happened was Milo had left the altar in order to sit with his parents and got stuck in the communion line. Milo felt embarrassed by what Ray said. A few weeks later, Margaret went on her first annual business trip to Florida. Actually, this year was Arizona, and left early one Saturday morning. That afternoon, after Margaret was gone, Ray took Milo and Lydia on a trip up to New Seneca for the weekend to visit with their cousins, as they had been quite bummed out that Margaret would be gone for the week. On the first night at the O'Malley's, Aunt Marie set up the basement for the kids to watch Pocahontas. The next morning, the Biancatellos went to church with the O'Malleys. That afternoon, the Biancatellos returned back to Cider Pond. Frankly, Milo was happy to be back in town, as he was still having a hard time with Margaret being away. The weekend before Margaret returned home, there was a family wedding with one of Ray's cousins. For some reason, the little ones were all invited too also. The Sunday afternoon before Margaret returned home, the Delaney's hosted a birthday party for Charlie and invited the Biancatellos along with the Schumachers. That's just Marilyn and Ralph's last name. That night, when Ray went to pick Margaret up from the airport, Aunt Michelle came over to the house to babysit Milo and Lydia. Before Aunt Michelle arrived, Lydia was fast asleep, and Milo fell asleep while watching Winnie the Pooh movie. For the rest of the year, Milo purposely brought a Winnie the Pooh play toy to school. This toy greatly annoyed Magruder, which made Milo want to bring the toy back anyways. She then resorted to keeping the toy in her desk during the day. On a couple other occasions, Magruder had been very nasty to Milo over trivial things. One day Milo had enough and raised the eraser at Magruder and moved it in a racing fashion like he was trying to erase her. Magruder told Milo that it may work on Watson, but it would not work on her. Otherwise, Milo started having too much fun rebelling against Magruder's reign of terror. Return to the gardens. The seer Adreno from the temple had decided that the kobolds needed a vacation to return to the gardens, which they had long been away from. For the kobolds, leaving this place where the governor had caused so much misery was a dream come true. There were a whole set of tools left behind which the kobolds had no interest in taking, and preferred to leave their pointless labors behind. This return to the garden was a great meeting between the forester kobolds and those clans that had been left behind. This was quite a joyful experience, to which the forester kobolds never wanted to leave again.
which pets are blessed with the fairest forms and faces,
The
which
summer
pets know best
vacation,
all the gentle social
one
graces,
glorious
which
day,
pets live
came
on cream
when
and loving
Magruder's
mats.
reign of terror had ended with the close of the school year and her well-needed retirement. On Magruder's last day, she gave the class one last reprimand and told the students that she did not want to hear any talking for the rest of the day. Milo took his last stance against Magruder and clicked his tongue, thus further angering her. Magruder sent Milo to Mrs. Watson's for the rest of the day. Now Mrs. Watson had been nice to Milo despite the disruption, and she even introduced him to her husband. Milo never got a chance to even say goodbye to Magruder, as he spent the rest of the day with Mrs. Watson, which had only been an hour at most. At the end of the day, Mrs. Watson reminded Milo to take his hat off. As it was, the current principal was retiring, and Milo asked Mrs. Watson if it would be okay to wear hats in the building once the new principal starts next year. Mrs. Watson explained the rule of etiquette on men not wearing hats in buildings, no matter who the principal was. That summer had been a great and exciting summer, full of exciting activities, and a great relief of being free from this curse of Magruder. Over this summer, the movie The Aristocats was re-released on home video, which was essentially a knockoff of 101 Dalmatians. Like the movie, this summer was a breakaway from the snobbish school system and a time to run wild. At first, the summer seemed to be off to a slow start, but this was to be expected. All Milo knew was that he was happy to get away from Magruder for good. In the early days of summer, the Biancatellos went to see the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Milo had laughed quite hysterically when Judge Claude Frollo fell off the Notre Dame tower. Margaret had taken Milo to talk to a counselor to talk about the way he had laughed so hysterically during the movie. For Milo, he saw in Frollo everything that he had hated in teachers since the beginning of school, and in Magruder in particular. Over that summer, Milo became particularly quirky about the legitimacy of any school authorities, particularly outside of school.
I'm king of the highway, prince.
Otherwise, Milo just wanted to get out cool in the West way. But Ray explained that this would mean they would not get to go on vacation to Columbus to see Beauty and the Beast on Broadway. Milo then said Beauty and the Beast was too girly for him anyways. Margaret then pointed out that
I
Milo
only
had been
got
putting
myself
together a
and this
little
big
mermaid
old
puzzle.
world. But
For
I
much
sip
of the
that
summer,
cup of life
Milo and Lydia
with my
were at
fingers
Marilyn's
curled.
and swimming in her pool.
I don't worry what road to take.
During
Don't
that
have to
summer,
think of that.
Milo still had to go to West
Whatever I
Mesa,
take is the road I
only
make.
on
It's the road
Thursdays.
of life. Make no mistake for
Unfortunately,
me.
this teacher Milo had
Yeah,
was a
Abraham
cranky
DeLacy, Giuseppe
woman with a
Casey,
nasty
Thomas
attitude
O'Malley.
and unfit to be working
O'Malley,
with
the alley
children.
cat.
Milo
That's
always
right,
found
and
a
I'm
way
very
to
proud
get
of
out
that.
of going
Yeah.
to West Mesa on Thursdays. On 2 occasions, Aunt Michelle invited Milo to go on activities with Salvatore and Johnny, and she asked what day worked best for him. Milo always suggested Thursdays, as he did not mind being at Maryland's swimming the other days. The time for adventure came when Milo, Lydia, Margaret, and Ray went on a vacation to Columbus for a week to see the Broadway Beauty and the Beast. This was a sort of haunt for Milo, as the prophecy had spoken. His past would always return to haunt him. On the first night in Columbus, Ray found The Simpsons on TV, which was the first time Milo ever got interested in the show. The episode was Two Bad Neighbors. This became utterly apparent when the Broadway version of the show first gave Milo flashbacks to the days of his toddlerhood before starting school. That night, Milo had a dream about accidentally sliding into his father's new shed and breaking it, to which he felt horribly guilty about. Before the play, the Biancotellos found a church in the suburb on which the seeds scattered in sown was sown. Frankly, Milo got quite obsessed with the hymn and heard it a couple times back at St. Timothy's. Milo ended up liking the Beauty and the Beast Broadway film more than he expected. On the way back from vacation, the Biancotellos returned back to the O'Malleys for a few days. This visit felt very similar to the visit taken 4 years ago, which is one of the few memories Milo had of his toddlerhood. He had visited the O'Malleys several times between the first visit and this time, but this memory seemed so different. Maybe there was a connection to Mira. Who knows? A few weeks after the Biancotellos returned home, the Rumcorns and Uncle Doug with his daughters came in town. The families returned back to Cedar Point and went to Seawood and Soaktown a couple times that summer. This year, Milo was able to go on more rides at Cedar Point. A few weeks later, before going to Seawood, Milo found that he got a letter from Mrs. Watson. Milo was not exactly thrilled about this, as he knew that the summer was in the last few weeks. This letter was telling Milo that she hoped he was having a good summer, and reminded him that it would be soon time to be back to work. Luckily, Milo forgot all about this and had such a fun trip at Seawoodin with Uncle Doug, Grandma Pearl, Dana, Nikita, and Kalisha. Milo had enjoyed his summer so much that he had no desire to ever return to school. The temple meeting. The children had met at the temple ground under the office of the priestly order. This temple was known as the Demusidian Temple. The meeting was composed of Melendo, the new Synexit Theodore, new Parobdi Alfie, the Sarcidex Polyphanes, a charism in the spirit of the author of the Didache, and a steer of restoration known as Daxivinus. The Sarcidex performs the priestly functions of the temples and are the mystic guides of those on earth. The charism in the Stygian equivalent to the spirit guide or guardian angel assigned to a particular individual on earth. This temple floor plan is shaped like the Sri Yatra symbol. The structure is a square with an overarching dome. On every side is a small rectangular vestibule with a mission-style facade. In the center of the temple is a stone shamrock altar with a three-sided pyramid in the center. In the corners on the north wall are two shrines to the angelic minister Demeter, while the south walls are two shrines to the angelic ministers Dionysus. On both sides of the entranceway, between the temple and the vestibule, are a set of flames that glow as the king in the name of the dance approaches closer. At this time, the flames were still medium-sized. They were the offerings brought forth. Alfie offered a bag of grapeseed, Theodore offered a bag of wheat seed, and Melendo offered a scroll with the list of names on earth that had not been revealed yet. The charism of the Didache had come to offer aid to the charges on earth. In the wisdom of the early patristic age, the Didache is an ancient text from the 1st century Christian community. Melendo had summoned this charism to spread his wisdom to those on earth in relation to the state the charges had been in at the time. The ceremony began with a reading of the 4th and 5th chapters of the Didache as such. And concerning the Eucharist, hold the Eucharist thus. First, concerning the cup, we give thanks to thee, O God, our Father, for thy holy vine of David thy child, which thou didst make known to us through thy child Jesus. To thee be glory forever. And concerning the breaking of the bread, we give thee thanks, our Father, for life and knowledge which thou didst make known to us through Jesus thy child. To thee be glory forever. And this broken bread was scattered upon the mountains, but was brought together and became one. So let thy church be gathered together from the ends of the earth into thy kingdom. For thine is the glory and power through Jesus Christ forever. But let none eat or drink of your Eucharist except those who have been baptized in the Lord's name. For concerning this also did the Lord say, Give not this which is holy to the dogs. But after you are satisfied with food, thus give thanks. We give thanks to thee, O Holy Father, for thy holy name, which thou didst make to tabernacle in our hearts, for the knowledge and faith and immortality which thou didst make known to us through Jesus thy child. To thee be glory forever. Then thou, Lord God Almighty, didst create all things for thy name's sake, and givest food and drink to men for their enjoyment, that they might give thanks to thee. But us hast thou blessed with spiritual food and drink and eternal life through thy child. Above all, we give thanks to thee, for thou art mighty. To thee be glory forever. Remember, Lord, thy church, to deliver it from all evil, and make it perfect in thy love, and gather it together in its holiness, from the four winds to thy kingdom, which thou hast prepared for it. For thine is the power and glory forever. Let grace come, and let this world pass away. Hosanna to the God of David. If any man be holy, let him come. If any man be not, let him repent. Maranatha, O Lord, come. Amen. But suffer the prophets to hold the Eucharist as they will. After reading of the Didache, Melendo, Theodore, and Alfie understood what this meant. Melendo knew that the day of initiation was near, and the king was at hand. Theodore was summoned to end division, and Alfie was summoned to promote diversity. After the completion of the summoning, Polyphanes brought out a parchment map and placed the seeds and the scroll on the map. Then the map was folded tightly and thrown into the sacred fires. The map did not disintegrate in the fires or become affected in any way. After the burning rite, Daxivitus declared that this is the day of fulfillment of the prophecies. Daxivitus declared that the days of desire have been fulfilled, and the reuniter of dancer and dance has come to pass. The building of the foundation. By this time, the kobolds were summoned back to Bubel's for a surprise task. The kobolds were not exactly thrilled about leaving the gardens, as the time there had been so peaceful and enjoyable. The good news was that the kobolds were free to return to the gardens during downtime on this particular task. The seer of doom, Uriama, came to the kobolds and warned them of a great flood that would take out Londinium. Uriama gave the kobolds instructions to build a water-resistant subterranean shelter that could endure the flood. Uriama explained that there were others in the city not of the Rakshasian race, known as the Londinians, to be welcomed into the shelter when the floods came. Yoram explained that he had created a large number of coins enchanted to repel the Rakshasians. Yoram explained that many who appear to be Rakshasians are only pretending to be out of fear of persecution, while many will pretend to be of different orders as to invade the shelter. Yoram explains that the Rakshasians have been warned of the flood and invited them to accept healing from the curse and be restored to the jinn status or return back to their own realm. The final instruction of Yoriyama was to accept anyone into the shelter who had a coin. Breaking ground began immediately. Many Londinians showed their coins and began to help dig the foundation. After removing the silty and fertile soil, the workers found this solid stone. As the instructions dictated, this silty and fertile soil was set aside until use at a different time. The stone layers were specifically chiseled to create blocks to be set aside for a later purpose. Milo's first semester of second grade. The year had come when it was time for Milo to prepare for his first Holy Communion, along with this other strange sacrament known as confession. In Milo's second year of Sunday school, he had this great teacher who just loved him. Her name was Mrs. Thompson, an older, retired teacher who loved children and giving them this experience of the divine. Sunday school began after Ray and Morgan had gotten back from their anniversary weekend, while Milo and Lydia stayed with Grandma Pearls. On the first day of class, the student learned about the sacrament of confession. This sacrament spoken of was pleasantly surprising to Milo. He had lived in a world of school where the only way to survive was to keep secrets from teachers. Secrecy was the only way to avoid getting punished, and the tattletale was the most reviled of all. Yet this teacher explained that we could tell these people who say Mass any horrible things that would get us grounding, and we would actually be forgiven. This was an utterly strange thing for a child at this age. Who wants to tell the adults about things we did? All they do is yell at us. But tell a priest these bad things and we're forgiven? This is such a strange thing. Otherwise, school had not been such a bad experience for Milo that year, as he had all good teachers he got along with. His main teacher was Mrs. Sprinter, who had just had a baby a couple months ago. Her husband Rick often brought the new baby Grace into school. Yet for Milo, it took him a while to trust teachers after the ordeal he had a couple years ago. Even if school was not this hell that he experienced under Magruder, Milo still preferred to be at home. He longed to join the school at St. Timothy's without realizing that Catholic school would not be any better. Plus, he could not help but dream of all the fun he would have and getting to be in school with his cousins. That fall, the Biancatellos adopted a new puppy from one of Margaret's co-workers. This woman's dog had 3 pups. Milo and Lydia named the dog Ginny, as this was the only name both kids liked. School could be a bit difficult for Milo, particularly with other students. Milo always had some rivalry with one or more students. At the beginning of the year, Milo had at least 6 enemies. Frankly, Milo was not one to tolerate bullying or students acting like teachers. This had its root in the past years at school, before the difficult teachers, and Magruder in particular. On one such occasion, Mrs. Sprinter explained that she was going to be visiting Mrs. Magruder and asked the students to draw some pictures for her. Milo explained that he did not particularly like Magruder, to which Mrs. Sprinter patiently told Milo that it would be a nice gesture. All Milo did was draw a picture of Marge Simpson and a snake and a house that took up probably 15% of the paper space. On another occasion, Milo even asked the new principal if Mrs. Magruder really got fired and that he could keep a secret. The principal explained that Magruder really had retired, but in his nice try way. Eventually, the Christmas holiday came, in which was time to break from studies and a time for celebration. Christmas Eve Mass had been once again particularly pleasurable and enchanting. Milo got to go up on the altar as at Christmas as the priest invited all the children to go up.